Welcome attendees to the April 2023 edition of AMAASE. Ask Me Anything About Social Enterprise. This is your opportunity to ask those burning social enterprise questions. My name is Christine Spottiswoode. I normally fill my days as the project lead for ABC, and today I am honored to be your host. I'll start by acknowledging that I am joining you today from Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, a traditional meeting ground, gathering place, and traveling route for the Cree, Saulteaux, Blackfoot, Métis, Dene, and Stoney Nakoda. I would like to acknowledge all of the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. I believe a treaty is an inheritance, a responsibility, and a relationship. I hope that recognizing our status as treaty people is one small action of many that will help us to be good neighbors to one another, good stewards of the land, and good ancestors to all our children. I do welcome you to share in the chat if you are joining us from a different territory or if you're joining from Treaty 6 and want to acknowledge that. So AMAASE is our monthly opportunity for members of the social enterprise ecosystem to access and ask questions to a panel of capacity builders. It is held on the second Wednesday each month from 3:30 to 5 Mountain Time. These sessions are designed with our audience and attendees being the driver of the discussion. So this is your time and your questions that we are all here for. I invite you to start gathering your questions and getting them ready so we can make the most of our time together while I introduce our panel guests. Today we have Dan Overall from Trico Foundation, Brittany Kerlick from Trico Foundation, and I think I saw Philip Lozanos from Momentum sneak in, Meredith Parrish from Innovate Calgary, and Alex Laidlaw from the Calgary Foundation. So now I invite you, our audience, to share your questions. If you did submit a question in advance, now's a good time to raise your hand and share it. If not, we'll get to it throughout the event. We're a fairly small group, so you're welcome to unmute, raise your virtual hand in the reactions button, or type your question into the chat and I can call on you. We do invite you to turn on your video or your audio and ask your question if you are comfortable, but if not and you want to type into the chat, I can read it out. And does anyone have a question to get us started today?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Hi, I work with our Council Wood Buffalo here in Fort McMurray, Treaty 8, and we are in the process of beginning my brain just went blank. We're turning an old landmark cinema, which is abandoned, a 6 cinema building, into a social enterprise. It will be the home of our offices, Arts Council, but as well, we will have, the idea is for us to be independent and no longer have to go out with a begging bowl to the community, to all the powers that be. So we have a 5-year plan related to that. This is new for us. And also, I don't believe there's another social enterprise in our community. We did our due diligence with the feasibility study through Interweave and through the funding that was available through that a year and a half or so ago. Right now, what we're coming out is I'm the partnerships manager. So I'm a fundraiser, basically. And among other things, I also deal in our Indigenous community and manage several Indigenous staff doing work outside of our community, in our rural community, which around here means fly-in communities, remote communities, that sort of thing. And I'm also a visual artist myself. So what we're running up against is I'm a little nervous around tax things because you get this very vague answers from Revenue Canada. It's almost like whoever answers the phone is the authority in the moment and subject to you getting shot in the foot later. So when it comes to things like naming rights for the building, a tax receipt versus a marketing expense, revenue that we get, we're going to have 2 parking lots and we're going to have office spaces that we'll be renting out. So I'm sort of wondering if anyone can give me some advice or best practices on how those are handled or where I can find that kind of information so we don't stumble. Because of course we're the arts and all eyes are on us waiting for us to be flaky and fail, which is just not going to happen.
Thank you for your question, Sharon. Is there a panelist who's keen to take a stab at that question first? I know it'll start with our favorite, we are not offering legal advice, but
So we're not lawyers. So the best thing you can do is actually talk to someone who's familiar with CRA and the rules and regulations around social entrepreneurship and generating revenue based on your legal status. They can be few and far between though. But a few things that you might want to check out before even talking to a lawyer, just to kind of like get sort of some information, is the CRA has a tool around related businesses where you can actually do like a quiz to figure out how is this connected to our mission, because there are certain rules around what charitable organizations can do if it's related to their mission, which would be a related business. There's also different rules around and provisions around using excess space, if a charity has excess space, and potentially using that as revenue generation. So there are some provisions around CRA. If you throw your email address in the chat box at some point, I'll grab it and I can send you just like a few direct links to that, so you're not stuck on the CRA website figuring that out. So I would just look at that stuff. The other one is there are a few legal resources that are coming out more now. So one you might want to look into is Integral.org. So Integral.org has been doing some workshops and has a tool around legal structures to help organizations kind of figure out what's the sort of best way to move forward. And then they also they work with lawyers and have some advising and things like that. And my colleague Ada just threw their website into the chat box for us as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, so those might be some places to start, because there are different provisions based on your legal status. You did say you're a charitable organization. So there are rules around specifically around related business. What does that mean? There's a quiz on CRA around that. And so just getting familiar with how CRA talks about it before you spend time talking to a lawyer, well, spend resources talking to a lawyer, is always good to do that legwork first as well, is what I would say.
Perfect. That's great. Thank you. I appreciate the resources.
Thanks, Brittany. Did anyone else have anything to add for Sharon?
Just to build on Brittany's comments, I think Integral.org actually will give you a free half-hour of consultation, I think. So will be on the website that Ida put in the chat. And as well, you may want to think about speaking to other arts organizations that are doing something similar in other communities. It's actually, there's like a major one in Calgary that repurposed a school, and I haven't thought about them for so long, I'm forgetting who they are.
It's Space in Calgary, and they actually sent me everything from concept through to their calls for action, their marketing, who they went to. The biggest and most helpful question they answered for me was what mistakes they made so that we could avoid them. But yes, I've been so busy looking at plans, I hadn't really thought about reaching out to them in terms of taxes. Thank you.
Yeah, we're huge believers in Trico. Like, speaking to people who have been there, done that is gonna fast track you and save your life. So think of other organizations who have kind of gone through that journey and get their tips on the legal issues. Again, be careful in terms of, it's not legal advice. I always double check with lawyers, but just as a basis for wrapping your head around these issues can be invaluable.
Thank you very much.
Dan? Alex, I saw you unmuted before. Did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to pop something in the chat. I'm not an expert at all by any means, Sharon, but the question you raised about naming rights, I'll pop a podcast that I've listened to. It's a long time ago, so I don't remember it super well, but I do remember this having a good conversation about that delineation between philanthropic naming and sponsorship and where that line's drawn. So that could be a resource for you in that specific part of your question.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
I thought I saw Ruby in the room, and Ruby, you had pre-submitted a question. Did you want to bring yours forward?
Sure. I'm glad I sent them both because I've already forgotten one of them, so I hope it's still there. And my first question, it might sound silly, but I honestly don't know. I would like to ask all the investors kind of, I understand from the person being invested in what the benefits are to them, allows them to grow. but what is the benefit for the investor? And have any of you ever lost your investment that you've put forward for an organization?
It's a great question, and I think the first time we've had that one.
I can
Alex,
hop
you want to go
on.
ahead?
Yeah, I can hop
thanks.
on and take a stab at that question. Thanks for the question, Ruby, and good to see you again. From our perspective at Calgary Foundation, our work in impact investing is meant to complement our grant making. So we're looking at opportunities to put the assets that we'd normally have towards investments in community, towards locally impactful projects. Now, for us, that means the benefit is we are looking for a financial return. We're looking for someone to repay. When I say investment, for us, that's typically a loan structure. That's the way that we've been investing, is with debt, and we're getting a loan repaid with interest. So we're looking at that financial return to sustain our future grant making, while at the same time hoping to see the benefit of the project that we're lending to also have great impact in community in the short term. So a chance to either accelerate or achieve impact that might not otherwise be possible in the community just by the fact of lending and having those resources available to a charity or an organization. So that's why we participate in this space. We've never been in a place where we've lost our investment entirely. We've only been doing this work for about 8 years now, and we've been lucky enough that the projects have, and sometimes they've come along in a different path than they first expected, but we've never been in a place where we've lost that original investment. And it is somewhat times just a patient process of working with an organization to the circumstances they face. For example, a lot of organizations during the pandemic, the revenue streams that they would have used to repay their debt on schedule just disappeared overnight. So if you were running kids soccer or a ticket-based arts program, you didn't have that ability to repay debt, and we worked alongside them to restructure loans during that period of time to make things work more long-term. But we have been lucky enough to, I don't have an example of something that's completely fallen apart in a way that we haven't been able to be repaid in the end in some way, shape, or form.
Thanks, Alex. Meredith, I saw you unmute.
Yeah, I suppose I can speak to UC a little bit. I think I do have some colleagues that are perhaps even better positioned to speak on it. But yeah, in terms of the benefit to us, I mean, it is it's a philanthropic based fund, and so supported largely by the United Way. And so we sort of have, goals with the fund to support sort of a growing ecosystem of social purpose organizations that are making positive changes in our communities. And so it's really important to us that, the organizations we're working with are, aligned from that social purpose lens, or we can work with them to sort of develop that social purpose in their organization, sort of as we work with them through the fund. And so we're really just looking for, sort of folks to be at a stage where their business model has been kind of tested with customers and beneficiaries, perhaps in different industries. That looks a little bit different. And for folks to be using innovative approaches. And so I think, with that focus on innovation, there is inherent risk in it, because sometimes these are, new solutions to social problems, and those, haven't been tested before. In terms of the part of your question around, are there organizations that we've supported that's, the investment hasn't been successful? I think earlier on, as we were kind of testing sort of our positionality with the fund and kind of our impact thesis with the fund a little bit more, we did make a couple of investments that I think had us assume a little bit more risk than we maybe take on now. And so I think that's, it's unfortunate because it is an investment fund. So we're with for-profits, we're typically making equity investments. With nonprofits, we typically structure them as a loan, but we are looking for that return on our investment so that we can continue to use the fund to support other social purpose organizations. And so that's, yeah, really the unfortunate thing when an investment doesn't go well is then, you know, we're not like recouping that investment to be able to like continue to invest in other organizations. So.
Thanks, Meredith. And I do see Gail in the room and in the audience, so I'm just going to give her a quick second to see if she wants to chime in on that question. And if not, I will allow you to ask your second question, Ruby. We'll see if we can get her audio figured out. Dan, I see you unmuted.
Yes, I'd like to add some. So it's an absolutely fantastic question. A lot of reports on social finance talk about horror stories where social enterprises found out that the funder was actually a lot more focused on the kind of profit return, financial return side of things, as opposed to social impact. So be careful. One thing you may want to think about, I think it's absolutely crucial that you ask that question of potential funders, but also ask that question of people they funded in terms of what their perspective is as to what the key drivers were. That could be really informative for you. And also keep an eye out, like you may think that you're in the clear when someone focuses on, let's say, impact, but there's also lots of reports that talk about horror stories where because a fund is focused on impact, they require measurement, which can be expensive and complicated and wasn't just a good fit for the organization. So even though you may get the social impact answer, you may want to dig a little bit deeper as to what they're actually expecting from you, given their focus on social impact.
Thanks, Dan. Ruby, did you have a second question?
I think it was this one, but please correct me, Christine, if you have it in writing. My follow-up question was, as investors, what do you want to see from an organization that would let you know that they're ready to be invested in?
That was very close to how you had written it. So good memory. Phil, do you have you haven't spoken yet, so maybe I'll throw that one your way and see if you have anything.
My audio cut out just for a brief second there. Can we just repeat the question really quick, Christine?
Yeah, so just questions you might have for the social enterprise to gauge if they're ready.
That is a great question. And hello, everyone. I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name's Philip. I'm with Be Local. It's a network of local businesses in Calgary that believe in the idea that doing good is also good for business. And part of the reasons why I'm a little bit distracted today is we're hosting a gathering event we're going to have a big bonfire because we believe community is a big part of creating impact. And so we're rooting it in nature. We're bringing people together and kind of to the other question, like that was brought up earlier, just in terms of connecting with other people who have done it around some of the legal questions like C-Space and Dieter. They're a member of Be Local. I hope Dieter will be there today. But part of the work that we try to do is bring people together to help inspire one another and help people actually accomplish what they're trying to do. So what's a good way of figuring out if you're ready, I think, is actually having conversation with other social entrepreneurs would be a really easy starting point. Getting an understanding of what other people have done and where things are at. Like, you're going to get countless opinions in this world from talking heads like the heads on the screen. And then there's going to be people, and Dan kind of highlighted this before, right? Like your peers, people who are rolling up their sleeves and are trying to do the work. And so I think that'd be a really fantastic starting point, is just kind of having coffee with other people, connecting with other, whether they're fully self-identified, I'm a social entrepreneur, or I'm someone just interested in this aspect of entrepreneurship that can create an impact. I think talking to other people and seeing the full variety and the full spectrum of what that could look like from an organizational perspective, from a business structure perspective, that'd be a fantastic kind of like gauge, especially given local context of what readiness could look like. So talk to peers, and then outside and beyond that, I think another good indicator would be the people and the resources and networks behind you. And so a good indicator I could tell in terms of readiness is whether or not that individual has the capacity, or whether or not they've got people in their back pocket, connections, networks that they can lean on to kind of rely on for support. And this is where I'm just going to plug the work I do nonstop, but belocal.org. Thanks for putting it in there, Christine. But again, this work, this space that we're in is new. Some of it is new, some of it is old, but you know, for a lot of folks, it's overwhelming and it's intimidating. But again, I think that's where the power of relationship and the power of community can come in and do some of that heavy lifting alongside you. So yeah, reach out to other people and peers that are trying to do the same thing.
Thanks, Phil. I am jealous of your bonfire and wishing I was in Calgary right now so I could join you. I'm glad. I hope the weather's better. Excellent, because yesterday the weather was not bonfire weather up here. So. Did anyone else want to add to Phil's comments for Ruby's question? Thanks, Alex. Go ahead.
Yeah, I can pop in. So it's difficult to say with kind of a blanket statement what readiness looks like, because each and every project readiness might have a little bit of a different look and feel. I can pop in the chat after I'm done talking. We do have a section on our website where we have a loan readiness self-assessment tool that talks about, if you're considering taking on debt, some of the different considerations that we might look at when we're looking at underwriting a potential loan. Some of those relate back to just the financial capacity and planning to repay the loan, the history of financial track record an organization might have, the people involved and the decision-making processes involved. So that gives kind of some of those different dimensions of what we look at in considering what loan readiness looks like. But what I think it comes back to, when it comes to debt and equity are a little bit different, and maybe Meredith could speak to this a little bit in the context of UC, but when it comes to debt, there needs to be a confidence that even goes beyond what you would do with grant funding from a charitable perspective, that you can repay the loan. And that confidence, that feeling that you know everything's kind of lined up and ready to go, and the only thing that's holding you back is the funding. I know a lot of people might experience that in the charitable sector. That's a good feeling of, we know this can go forward. We know we'll have the money to repay it in the long run because we're confident in X, Y, Z. That's a good kind of feeling test, gut check test as to what readiness might look like from a feel perspective. And then this tool can give some more dimensions as to, well, other areas of that you might want to look into. Like, is your board comfortable with considering debt? That's a big one, is making sure the people within the organization are ready for that as well.
Thanks, Alex. Meredith, did you want to add anything from your side?
Sure, yeah, I can speak, I guess, just to like some of the, some of the things that we're looking at when we're assessing applications to something like the UC Social Impact Fund. So yeah, I think some of the things that bode well, we look for, like, as Phil was saying, like, does this organization have sort of like a strong community, like a strong sort of like pool of advisors or, others who are supporting this work around the founder. Self-awareness is really important. So like, is there like a demonstrated awareness of like gaps or like areas for improvement? We do typically look for some kind of like validation. So usually that's like early customers or early sales that the organization has already taken on. What are some other things? So we do, we also think about the organization's sort of existing social impact. So kind of look at, how sophisticated is their impact thesis or their like measurement strategy? Do they have one in place? If not, like certainly not a deal breaker, but it is something that we want to work with folks on through the process of investment. And then the other thing I would say, which I guess links back kind of to the first point, is just around like what other like support or investment have they been able to secure? So have they been able to secure other grants? Have they, received investment from friends and family? What kind of other organizations or individuals are sort of like vouching for their success?
Thanks, Meredith. Any last thoughts from Meredith? Oh, Phil, I see you've unmuted. Go ahead. Or for Ruby, sorry.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Phil.
Thanks, Christine, and thanks for everyone's patience. It's hilarious. We're in the year 2023, and I'm taking a Zoom call from my car. So welcome to the future. Another indicator of readiness is validation, right? And so we often talk, like, if we're strictly just wearing our business hats for a while, there's this idea of like developing a full product or a full service, and investing tons of money and resources to develop it, to prototype it, to market it. There's ways that you can kind of get validation from your customer base before, you know, at various stages throughout the process, well before you've actually created the product. And so, you know, one indicator of readiness is like, what are you doing to validate some of the assumptions that you're making throughout the product design process? And so, for example, if you're looking to design a new toy car, what if you just create an image of it on a computer or create a website and do pre-sales and see how many people are actually interested in putting down a deposit, because this toy car is gonna be so expensive. They need to first start with a deposit before they can buy the, you know what I'm getting at. At the end of the day, how is there any way that you can kind of test some of the assumptions you're making to make sure that you're heading in the right direction, so that you're not like really far deep into this process and it's hard to like take some back steps? And so part of what we really try to encourage in the network is really this idea of experimentation, prototyping, and like proving through repeated trial and error.
I'll just jump in there. So we do grants, we do experimentation grants. So it's sort of to test things and learn things if you've identified what your next step is. So always a route that could be explored, especially if you are working with a funder and looking down the road. Maybe they'd be able to give you some guidance on what they want to see before they would be able to fund you. And there might be some chances to plug into that. We always talk to organizations through our assess process about staying in an affordable loss zone. So what are you comfortable with losing? What are sort of the risks associated with your next step? Are you comfortable with them? Is there a way you can maybe lower them if it's something you're uncomfortable with? The next is shortening feedback loops. So exactly what Philip's saying is, how do you shorten those feedback loops and get the information that you need sooner, or with less resources out there? The next one is, can I test or learn, experiment? Can I try this out without, you know, building that plane, right? And then the last one is there somebody I can talk to? So somebody I have camaraderie with, a friendly wise skeptic. Could I have a very frank conversation with someone from Calgary Foundation or from UCED to really gain some of those sort of insider insights before I fill out the application, for example, because that's ultimately going to get you some more information sooner with less resources put out, right? Which is then putting less risk on your next step.
Thanks, Brittany. You are being invited to share your idea around a bonfire if you want to get in your car and take the rest of this call from there and join Philip where he is. Awesome. Thanks, Ruby. I hope that helped. Did you have any follow-up comments or questions? Great. Thank you so much. And does anyone else have a question? Anyone from our audience have a question they would like to? You can raise your hand or unmute.
I'm happy to pose a question. My name is Sarah Austin. I'm the founder and CEO of Children First Canada. We're a national children's charity based here in Calgary, Alberta, in Treaty 7 territory. This is my first time coming, so I'm really eager to be part of this community and learn from the group of people here, both the people on the panel as well as other people joining and posing questions. This isn't necessarily a well-formed question because I'm very new to this conversation, but we developed a leadership program during the pandemic that we piloted in schools in Ottawa. It was funded by the Community Foundation grant in Ottawa. We ran this program over 2 years in English and French. It was basically a leadership training program for young people to learn about their rights and responsibilities as citizens and to be social leaders and change makers in their community. It was wildly successful with the students, teachers, and school board administrators, and they are keen to scale up this program in Ottawa, but we are also seeing interest and demand from other schools across here in Calgary and across the country to basically take this model and expand it. And so we're trying to find a way to scale this up and looking at the pros and cons of doing this through a charitable approach of, seeking grants from foundations, taking more of a philanthropic approach versus a social enterprise approach. And I don't really know even where to begin to sort of figure that out, the pros and cons of sort of treating this as a social enterprise versus more of a charitable endeavor. Given that we're very early in the stages of this, eager to hear any advice that this panel or others joining might have around where to begin learning and beginning to figure out like a business model to be able to scale this program up and the right way to do so, philanthropic versus social enterprise. Maybe it isn't a binary, but like maybe there's a combination of approaches that might be valuable for us to explore.
So I'll jump in. There's a number of different ways to approach things. There's different structures that are available to you within your organization or starting up something separate to you. One of the things we always talk to organizations about is that form should follow functions. So it should be really identifying what your goals are and then choosing a structure that best allows you to achieve those goals, right? So it might not, like you guys might sit down and say, this is what we want to do. And maybe it is through charitable grants, or maybe it's through some revenue generation, or maybe it's a combination of both. But I think it's all about your goals and then figuring out the structure that's going to allow you to best achieve that goal. And one of the things you might want to look into is Dan had previously talked about people who have been there and done that. So are there any other Canadian organizations that have kind of done that, right? Like scaled across provinces, and how have they structured themselves? So one organization that came to mind to me was Jump Math, which is out of Ontario. Dan would know more of what they're up to these days because it's been a while since I talked to them. But looking at maybe what type of structure they hold and how they're able to do that might be an organization that came to mind to me. But there's also in the how you work and the people you work with will have some ideas of sort of closely aligned organizations, but sometimes it's not an either or. It's kind of figuring out what makes the most sense for what we're trying to achieve, and then let's try to figure out that structure that'll allow us to achieve it, right? And it's really about just sort of making those, like understanding what's available to me, and then making that decision and owning your journey with that piece is what I would say. But I think that sort of people who've been there, done that would probably be a pretty powerful avenue for you to look at, for sure. I'll just stop there and let anybody else talk.
I have to buy everyone a beer now because I did the muted thing. Anyone else have any? Thanks, Brittany. Anyone else have anything to add? Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, I may not add much more depth. Like Brittany, like nailed it right on the head there, just in terms of the form following function. Yeah, like being structure agnostic is often helpful, like not having any bias for one structure or another, and kind of viewing all structures as different tools in the toolbox that serve different needs, potentially at different times on your journey. And so maybe like some helpful advice might be to just check assumptions or bias or preferences that you may have for one, and instead view them as simply tools that help you make the impact you're trying to create in the world. And then above and beyond that, I might just kind of like comment, like Sarah, that this question is like super, super common. Almost everybody who embarks on this journey of impact and entrepreneurship often ask themselves, like, which is the best structure for me? And there's no, like, you're going to hear this a lot probably throughout the webinar today, is just like this idea that there's no clear black and white solution. And the fact that you're asking it is healthy. It's normal. You're going to hear a lot of differing opinions. And it's just kind of fun, like the part of the fun of this journey as well.
I like your use of the word fun, Phil. That's really, I love your optimism.
Yeah, thank you, Phil and Brittany, for that great feedback. Yeah, I mean, we continue to evolve. I mean, the organization started as a not-for-profit originally because we were doing lots of advocacy. It was founded in 2015, and at the time, charities were really restricted around political activities. Not that we're doing like political activities per se, but influencing public policies that impact the lives of children. So we started as a not-for-profit, have since become a charity because the restrictions around political activities changed. But as our programs continue to grow and evolve, we're continuing to evolve as like our structure as an organization. Looking at social enterprise seems like a natural way for us to consider sustainability for the organization, but also aligned with the values that children themselves hold and the change that they want to drive in their communities and across the country.
Alex and then Dan.
Yeah, just a very brief comment on the trends that I'm kind of seeing in that you talked about those two models for in-class development and philanthropic route versus kind of social enterprise model. The general kind of themes I'm seeing is that if it's digitized content that's kind of direct to customer, that's where people are going the more social enterprise exploration potential route. When it's very much in school-based programs, it seems like the more conventional philanthropy route has maintained a lot of popularity and momentum. But that's a generalization from a very small amount of seeing some grant requests over the last few years and not seeing as many people knocking on my door for financing. But I thought that was maybe worth just adding for context from what I'm seeing out in community.
That's helpful to just to get that, I guess that feedback around what you're seeing. And we're a little bit of both in the sense that like originally we just designed this as a PDF tool that teachers were using, and then they were experimenting and creating their own digital tools related to it. But we think that in order to scale, it does need to be digital and like a learning platform that teachers and students can access and be part of a virtual community, if you will. But it would be actualized in classrooms. So teachers and students would be leading the content in a school setting within their classrooms. So maybe a little bit of a hybrid of what you've talked about there.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, did you want to go ahead?
Yeah, the Trico materials talk about this a lot. And like the fundamental question is like, why do social entrepreneurship? And a lot of people say, well, the answer is to have social impact. But that actually can't be the answer, because you can have social impact other ways. You can have social impact with a grant model. So what is unique to social entrepreneurship versus grant models or government-based? And it's the use of business models. So to figure out whether your social enterprise works for you, you have to see, do we have a business model that can actually work for us? Which means you have a customer that you think can actually afford your service. Because if you can't, that may lean you towards more doing like a grant-based type of approach. And again, Ida will probably put hopefully in the chat some of the materials that we offer for you to help you go through that analysis. But the heart of social entrepreneurship is that kind of business model of a customer who can afford your services, right? So keep an eye out for that as you're kind of looking through whether social enterprise would actually work for you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
And thank you, Sarah, for your question. There's a few comments, there's some offerings in the chat there from Trico Foundation that you can explore as well. And Phil is planning on hosting bonfires quarterly, so we'll try and not have them conflict with the AMAASE maybe in the future so we can all attend. We did have a question from Business Link Marketing asking if there are any grants or funding available at this moment for nonprofits who are just starting. And then Phil, thanks, very lovingly posted AMAASE, which is our online resource navigation tool. You're welcome to check that out. There would be some ability to search for grants there, but I will open it up to the panelists if they have anything else or anything specific they want to add.
And I just are you thinking starting up a not-for-profit, or are you thinking a not-for-profit that's starting to explore social entrepreneurship is my question.
Good
The
clarification.
second one, as what you said. Yeah. So just exploring social entrepreneurship and then trying to get like some funding in terms of even mentorship.
Yeah. So there's so AMAASE, which Phil shared, is a really great resource for that. One of the other places, it really depends on sort of the stage they're at. So I'm going to talk about ours, which is once you have an idea of what you want to do with your social enterprise. But another one that sort of, I think, takes more of an exploratory approach is potentially Innoweave has some funding available. That I believe they still do some like organizational readiness and opportunity identification grants. I think they're mostly matching grants. which can be a barrier for some organizations, but that's another place to kind of look and see what they're doing. So at Trico Foundation, our funding, so our work, we're pretty form agnostic. We work with sort of organizations along the spectrum, different legal structures. However, our funding is available to charitable organizations. So organizations who have charitable status are able to apply for a grant for us. And the way that we structured our grants is they're smaller grants, they're $25,000, but they're for organizations that have identified the idea they want to explore and what they think they need to learn within that idea. So what experiment do they need to do? What test do they need to do in order to move their idea forward? So we have some funding around that. And then we also have coaching and resources available for free to organizations that maybe want to sit down and explore, what does this look like in my organization? What are some sort of groundwork things? What does social entrepreneurship sort of mean? What would our goals be? We have resources around that through our assess program as well. And everything's online. So online, and then we also do coaching for select organizations as well. And then funding for organizations that have identified, this is my next step, this is what I need funding for, sort of those small scale tests to learn what they need to learn.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brittany. Alex, Meredith, do either of you have anything to add? All right.
If I could just add something that Arts Council is, we went through society to register charity, did all of that. And then we actually we were very successful in getting funding in Interweave's first look, and we used the money from that exactly as we had an actually fabulous meeting with them through the Community Foundation here in Fort McMurray. And they were super helpful in giving us the information before we applied for the money, and the money was a grant that allows us to do our feasibility study to see if in fact the idea we had was legit. It was probably the most sensible granting I've ever applied for or been involved with in my life. They were so straightforward and so supportive, and they gave us great information up front about whether or not we fit or we were wasting their time. And I know that funding was actually oversubscribed. It was phenomenal, the applications they had for it. We were thrilled to get the money we did. And our feasibility study told us that, yes, it was viable. And we're risk adverse. We're a small arts organization in an oil town. And there's never been support for the arts before other than through us. So we're fighting lots of battles and succeeding. And when I say risk adverse, is that we apply for grants or we come up with the money ourselves. We're not looking for loans of any kind. We're looking to do this totally in stages, debt free every step of the way. And I found, like, the Inuit people, I cannot say enough good things about how supportive and helpful and great they were in giving us realistic answers and support. And now we, of course, can go back to them because we're a success story with them and say, you know, who can give us funding? We just don't want to do that. We want to do it we want to do it, you know, on our own. And that's where the social enterprise comes in. So for us right now, we're just navigating Revenue Canada waters, and, you know, I'll reach out to C-Space again. I noticed that their donate button takes you directly to the foundation for funding. So I don't know if that's endowment or how that works, but, you know, I'll find all the right people to answer those questions for me. But I truly cannot say enough good things about Interweave in terms of answering those questions, whether you want to go down the I'm willing to risk and your board supports that, or we as a staff are not willing to ask our board to risk that. So I've just found them to be super helpful for what that's worth to anybody.
Thank you, Sharon. It's always a great amaze when audience starts chiming in and adding to questions. So thank you for that. Did you have any other follow-up questions? All right. Thank you again for the question. And I did have a couple other pre-provided questions, but I don't see any of those folks in the room. So I can throw them out there for discussion, but want to put it to the audience if there are any other questions, clarifications. If you've already asked a question, that's okay too. You're welcome to ask another one, or if you've kind of thought more about yours and you want to seek clarity, you're welcome to speak up or raise your hand. I will remind everyone that we're all learners here today, and talking about these things makes us all stronger. I think panelists, I know I learned a lot when I used to be a panelist, sometimes more I think than the audience, as well as the people in the room who maybe are here just to listen to the questions that are being asked. So please resist the urge to not ask your question. If you have even just a half-baked question muddling in your brain, we can work it out on the floor if we need to.
There was one of the pre-questions that I thought it would be really great to get Phil's perspective on. So maybe before he pops out,
Sure.
which was around like the supply chain, Christine, there was a question specifically, how do I get my materials? And I thought Be Local would be great to hear from.
I will, it's funny, that's the one I was copying and pasting as you popped up. So I believe this is the one. I put it in the chat, but I'll read it out. So this was from Key. How do I find sustainable circular economy materials for my products? Paper, printing materials, wood, CNC machining, biocomposites, etc. Are there any KICS Alberta growers, manufacturers, suppliers I should connect with?
I don't know if I fully understand the question, but because obviously it sounds like an industry that's not my wheelhouse, but it does bring up one of the Be Local members, which I'll throw their link in the chat. Again, don't know if I'm answering the right question, but they're known as Fuse 33. They are a maker space located on International Avenue, 17th Avenue Southeast. They're kind of like, think of like a gym and all the machines they have, but instead of like workout machines, they've just got crazy tools, lasers, cutters, 3D printers, welders, anything you can think of in your mind. They've got the tools for you or someone else to turn it into reality. And so if you're looking for, it sounds like some of the things might be tools related, but Fuse 33, at the end of the day, it's interesting because they also represent a little microcosm of an ecosystem. And so there's actually this really fascinating startup community based out of Fuse 33 where they all innovate and work together. And so they're kind of like a really smaller version of Be Local. I love them so much. And what ends up happening is a lot of these makers end up innovating with each other and helping each other with supply chain issues, with production issues, so that they're all kind of learning together in real time. So again, I'm sorry if I just completely answered a completely different question, but hopefully at least you know about Fuse 33.
Literally, Philip, that's what I was looking for you to say.
Because
in my notes, I have Fuse 33. I did not ask this question. We just got sent it ahead of time. But that's exactly what I was thinking in terms of Fuse 33, if there's something they need to have produced or what they're looking for, it might connect. And I was thinking about Be Local in terms of the power of that network of local organizations that really look to create things in a more local, sustainable way, potentially being the sort of been there, done that, be able to help you figure out who you need to talk to and source some of these things as well. I think some of these organizations would potentially have some really interesting connections for you.
Yeah, thanks for that tee up. It's almost like Trico's a big fan of Be Local, and like Be Local's a big fan of Trico. But yeah, actually that's the power of community, right? Like how many times are people just completely redesigning wheels that have already been designed for, or coming up with solutions to problems that we could have just copy and pasted a solution to from somewhere else. And so the supply chain issue is a fascinating one. And like I've seen that happen within the network where someone's looking to source compostable cups or is looking for a coffee supplier, and they're able to meet that person within the network. And so there's something really special about sourcing from your neighbor, where the face-to-face interaction is there and where there are repercussions if things go south, right? Like not everything in business goes ideal. And so having that face-to-face connection kind of helps with managing some of the liabilities that come with business. And so, yeah, the power of community, can't stress it enough. Dan, you've got one of these wise lean-ins. Were you going to say something, Dan, or this is just the regular Dan wise look?
The only thing I have, which is going to make you sorry that you asked, is professionally reinventing wheels, maybe the definition of a circular economy. Just throwing it out there.
So Kira is actually in the room. I didn't connect the Kira and the key on the email. So she put a couple notes in the chat. And I also realized we have a very heavy Calgary presence today. And so I do know there is a similar kind of makerspace in Edmonton. So I threw the link to that in the chat as well. And then just also, won't delve into it, but there is their design cafe. There's some work being done in Edmonton around the circular economy as a whole. So Kira, I know you sent me a message. I'll send you my email and we can connect on that, because there's definitely some neat stuff happening in that space right now. So thank you very much for your question. As you are in the room, did you have anything you wanted to add? I see your great thank you in the chat, but we'll open the floor. Okay, I'm seeing anyone. I do have a couple pre-provided questions, so I'll jump to this one. It's a fairly simple one. So just what grants or funds exist for startup women groups? Again, I will suggest AMAASE, as was mentioned before. Anytime you're kind of looking for a very specific demographic resource, AMAASE is a good place to start, but welcome the panelists to make any suggestions as to groups they may know of that might be a good place to start, and maybe that person will check out the recording for us.
So I would ask the same clarification question if they were here that I asked a business link. But I would just say those ones that I discussed, what's available to you is really going to depend on what you're looking for, I guess, and sort of what your goals are. So AMAASE is a great place to start. And then maybe Interweave somewhere, maybe Trico somewhere. But I would just say, like, I think it's always good just to check out their website, see what they're saying, and then also check out a lot of these groups. I think are always willing to have like a conversation with you, like with what Sharon was saying in terms of being really transparent if there's a fit or there's not a fit. I think that's our goal, or like, I mean, all capacity builders' goal as well is to try to make it as smooth as possible for you. So once you sort of start understanding the organization a bit more, then maybe having a conversation with them to say, is this a fit for what we're doing? I know that like at Trico, we have a under 10-minute idea submission versus a whole application process that allows organizations to know within 10 business days if we can move forward with it and if there's a fit. So sometimes it's worthwhile just doing those really easy, quick attempts and chats to figure it out.
Thanks, Brittany. Hopefully this person comes back and looks, because we've thrown some links in the chat. Alberta Women Entrepreneurs is a great resource, as well as the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, if you are looking for specifically women-focused resources. All right, any other questions, clarifications from folks in the chat? I think it's one of the few times we've heard from a good chunk of our audience today. There's not many that we haven't heard from.
Christine, I might just jump in because if that's okay, feel like I just keep interrupting hilariously / awkwardly because this fire isn't going to start itself. So I'm going to go burn a bunch of wood right now. Having said that, I love the conversation, so appreciate Trico and Haskane putting this on such an amazing event, inspiring. I'm going to throw my contact information in the chat as well if anyone wants to follow up with me about future bonfires. And as well, I also just want to plug one of the other, I keep emphasizing the importance of community. We've landed on some dates and a location for SVI, Social Venture Institute. It's like a 3-day gathering for social venture leaders from across the province. And we found a really, really special and beautiful location. Calgary folks aren't going to like me for choosing this new location. It's a bit of a drive, but we always make people drive down to us. So now it's our turn to drive up. So it's going to be at Métis Crossing. It's going to be a really special event. And it's really about bringing people from all across the province together to inspire and learn from one another. So if you feel like you're not getting enough of my hijinks during this call or from bonfires, you can spend 3 days with me at Métis Crossing and some of the best leaders from across Alberta and beyond. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Bill, and enjoy your bonfire.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bill. All right, I will throw this last question in the chat, and then if we don't get anything else, we might wrap up. So this person was wanting to understand the concept of social enterprise, how it is utilized to solve social problems between communities, and also wanting to learn that social enterprise is something with the land. I'm curious because of reconciliation. So a little more vague on the second half of that question. Maybe wish we had someone for clarification, but if anyone has anything they want to add for the first half or the second half of that question, I'll open that to the panelists. And then if you are in the audience and you've got a burning or mulling question or half a question, now would be the time to start bringing it forward.
Happy to jump in.
Mm-hmm.
The way Trico approaches social entrepreneurship, we say that as you explore it, we're finding that you typically come to two key transformations in relation to capitalism. One is moving business models in capitalism from being extractive to regenerative, and from moving business models in capitalism itself from being more self-centered to other-centered and connectedness. And that ties in very much to, I think, what the question is getting at. I can also highly recommend two other resources that specifically focus more on the reconciliation Indigenous approach and how that ties into what we're thinking social entrepreneurship can actually live up to. And that's Indigenomics by Carol Ann Hilton. And she's actually created an institute that we'll be linking in the chat very soon. And I haven't read it yet, but I've heard wonderful things by author Shailene Wetney-Jobin, who's actually a professor at the University of Alberta. She's recently written Upholding Indigenous Economic Relationships, where that actually specifically talks about some of these themes and actually connection to land. So I'd highly recommend that, and we'll put a link to her book from the local Canadian publisher in the chat as well.
Thanks, Dan. So I will start to wrap us up and look forward to seeing you again next month. I feel like we might be losing people to Phil's barbecue. That was bonfire. That was quite the enticing invitation. So please do check out the chat for the links that have been posted before, as well. There is some useful information that will be shared as we round up. So as we close, we do like to provide an opportunity for our panelists to share any updates from their organizations or things they know of in the ecosystem, and any closing thoughts they may have. If attendees have something they want to share in the chat as well, you are welcome to do so now. So Meredith, do you have anything to share or closing thoughts?
Yeah, just want to say thanks. I feel like there were a lot of really great engaging questions today. So that was yeah, really awesome. In terms of things to share, so at Innovate Calgary, some of you may know we recently launched the Social Innovation Hub, and are sort of busily getting sort of the last 5% of things finished, and starting to welcome in members, which is really exciting. We do just some open to anyone sort of casual community programming. So yeah, would love to invite folks to our breakfast club, which happens on the first Monday of every month at 9 a.m. In person, just a casual opportunity to connect with peers and sort of start your week off in a nice way. I will post a link in the chat. The one for May is about 75% up. So I'm going to post a link to our community programming. You'll see it up there by the end of tonight. Just leave it open on your browser. It'll be there. That's it. Thanks.
Thanks, Meredith. Dan, any things to share or closing thoughts?
Sure. There's a lot of exciting conversations going on right now. Social entrepreneurship is definitely one of them. There's also what I call social enterprise adjacent exciting conversations. One is the new federal legislation that allows charities to fund not just charitable organizations, but not-for-profits that are socially focused. And that's specifically designed to allow funding for populations that typically do not get funding. So there was a lot of startup funding of not-for-profit questions. So keep an eye out for that story. And the second one is there's an a number of amazing international leaders in the social impact space, Ashoka, Skoll, who created something called Catalyst 2030. And it's this visionary recommendations as to how funders could actually do a better job of overcoming power dynamics and actually funding organizations that help them have transformative impact. So they actually not only describe this doctrine, but they actually have a self-assessment survey that funders can take. Trico has gone through that survey and actually has published a blog about how they did, as well as the issues. And we've done that to kind of get the conversation advanced locally as to how funders can achieve these things. So sharing the link just now, but would encourage both fundees and possible funders to join this very important conversation. Thank you.
Dan and Brittany, do you have anything to add or closing thoughts?
Just building off of everything Dan said, check out our website. We do have resources available for free 24/7 for organizations exploring social entrepreneurship. So both curriculum and tools that they can access, some coaching supports, and then also some funding supports for charitable organizations. And we try to keep those as up to date as possible, and just been working with lots of organizations on them and been seeing some really cool things. So I think we'll be sharing some learnings around that soon as well. And so, yeah, just check everything out, and I hope you have a great night. And thank you so much for all your questions today.
Thanks, Brittany. And Alex.
I was double checking the calendar to make sure I wasn't missing anything, but I don't have anything imminent. I will say that our loan program at Calgary Foundation doesn't have any application deadlines. We accept applications on a rolling intake basis. And going back to some of our earlier conversation, we're happy to chat with anyone who's at any stage of readiness in terms of considering a potential project. Sometimes it can be a 2-year process from a first conversation to an actual written application being submitted. So if you're curious about learning more about the opportunity to borrow from Calgary Foundation, happy to have a conversation, and I can pop my information in the chat for anyone who's looking at how to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. And Alia has posted the May AMAASE session registration, so please share and attend. It's always a unique set of questions and conversations. I'm shocked at how diverse it can be for something that we host every month. And then again, she has posted the past sessions if you want to go back and see what else we've discussed. From an ABC perspective, I would invite you to attend our Curious Conversations. We're just in the middle of a series on innovation in unlikely places and big systems. So you'd be happy to join us for the second session, which happens this Friday. AMAASE.ca, our online resource navigation tool, has been mentioned several times as well. We do have a social entrepreneur LinkedIn group that you're welcome to join and connect with social entrepreneurs there. And I will start to announce that, hope this is okay, Meredith, the Social Enterprise World Forum 2023 is in October this year, and ABC will again be helping facilitate a community hub here in Alberta. This time we'll have 2 partners, Innovate Calgary in Calgary, where we will be making last year's event even better, and the Social Innovation Institute, as part of MacEwan University in Edmonton, will be hosting an event as well. Registration is not open, but I do welcome you to stay tuned for that if you would like to participate and be involved. And with that, I again am always so grateful for the questions and for everything that I learned by attending and listening to what folks have to say. So thank you for your attendance and participation, and I look forward to hearing your questions next month.